Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Productivity Boosters and Stress Reducers podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Heeb, and I can't thank you enough for listening in. Each episode, I will discuss a new tip or trick that will help you to live a productive and efficient life, professionally and personally. If you're ready to find your productivity rhythm, relieve stress, and meet your goals faster, then this is the podcast for you. This podcast is sponsored by Your Choice Concierge, created to make your life easier by providing flexible, hourly, personal, and professional assistance. Let us handle your busy tasks so you can focus on what's important. You can learn more about Your Choice Concierge by clicking the link in the description. In today's episode, I'll be discussing the science, psychology, and productivity cost of chronic overwhelm that comes from being constantly overloaded. We'll look at the difference between laziness and overload, the science of brain capacity and decision fatigue, why busy doesn't equal productive, the emotional cost of overwhelm, and practical ways to recover your focus, energy, and clarity. So let's start by asking ourselves this. Have you ever sat down with a full to-do list, plenty of time, and somehow you still couldn't start? And then the guilt kicks in, right? What's wrong with me? Why am I so lazy? But what if I told you you're not lazy? You're overloaded and you're not alone. So many people feel unmotivated, stuck, exhausted, and mentally foggy when they're chronically overloaded. It quietly destroys your productivity, your confidence, and even your health. Even simple things like answering a text or making a grocery list start to feel heavy. And this is where the self-doubt creeps in. You start questioning your work ethic or discipline, when in reality, your brain has been pushed way past its sustainable limits. So, before we go any further, let's clear up one of the biggest misconceptions, because understanding what's actually happening is the first step to breaking the cycle. So, let's talk about the difference between being lazy and being overloaded. Laziness is a lack of desire to do something. Overload is an inability to do everything, which, of course, from the outside can look like laziness, but on the inside, it feels like drowning. Overloaded people actually care deeply about their responsibilities, and that's the problem. They're carrying too much mental, emotional, or logistical weight. Some signs that you may be overloaded include being tired even after getting a good amount of sleep, falling behind even when you're going nonstop, not being able to focus like you used to, dreading simple tasks, finding yourself more emotional, or even the opposite, finding yourself numb, forgetting things more often, avoiding things you care about, feeling guilty for resting, and the list could go on. What's important to remember is that these behaviors aren't failures, they're signals. They're your brain's way of saying, I am maxed out, I need a break. And once you recognize them for what they are, you can respond with strategy instead of shame. So now that we know what overload looks like, let's break down where it actually comes from. Because overload isn't just one thing, it shows up in several different forms. So, to break it down even further, let's talk about the types of overload. There's cognitive overload, which is just too much information. There's emotional overload, which is too many feelings, needs, and/or expectations. There's time overload, which is too many tasks and not enough hours. There's decision overload, which is too many choices. And there's responsibility overload, which is too many people depending on you. Most people aren't dealing with just one of these either. They're dealing with several at the same time. For example, you might be emotionally overloaded from trying to keep everyone else afloat, while also dealing with cognitive overload from constant notifications, emails, and decisions. When these layers stack on top of each other, even small tasks feel monumental. So, understanding which type of overload you're experiencing helps you target the right solution instead of trying to power through everything at once. So, let's get a little deeper and talk about what all this overload actually does to the brain itself. Your brain has limits, it has limited working memory. It can actually only hold about 4 to 7 things at a time. When you exceed that, things start to happen. Your focus drops, your reaction time slows, your mistakes increase, and your memory worsens. Your brain doesn't push harder, it shuts down. And not only does your brain react when overloaded, but so does your body. It releases more cortisol and adrenaline. And you might think that sounds helpful, and it could be for a very short term, but it has damaging long term effects. Chronic cortisol causes brain fog, reduced creativity, emotional instability, sleep disruption, and it weakens your immune system. It puts your body and brain in survival mode. You stop thinking about long term and start reacting short term, which means you will procrastinate, avoid tasks, scroll mindlessly, lose the ability to focus, forget things, and just zone out. This isn't laziness, it's biology. This is why motivation disappears when you're overwhelmed. Your brain literally reroutes energy away from the parts responsible for planning, memory, and decision making, and it shifts it into survival mode. So, when you're overloaded and you find yourself procrastinating, zoning out, or doing easy tasks instead of important ones, it is not a character flaw. It is your brain trying to protect you from what it perceives as danger. Too much input and not enough capacity. And that brings us to one of the most common traps overloaded people fall into. It's the belief that doing more automatically means you're getting more done. I've touched on this before in previous podcasts, but it's important. So I'll bring it up again now, and I'll probably bring it up in future podcasts as well. But please, please, please remember that being busy doesn't always equal being productive. When you're overloaded, you tend to do things that are counterproductive. That includes jumping between tasks, starting a lot of things but not finishing most, or focusing too much on minor tasks and avoiding the important ones. Those things will, of course, have ramifications that affect your productivity. And that is slower performance, lower quality work, more errors, and just more frustration in general. It turns into a vicious cycle. Overload can also lead to decision fatigue. Every choice you make drains a little of your mental energy, and you make more choices every day than you realize. What should I do first today? How should I reply to this email? What should I wear? What should I make for dinner? Sometimes you may feel like you can't even make it to midday without your brain saying no more. And when that happens, your actions can veer from your actual intentions. You may find yourself doom scrolling, binge watching shows, snacking constantly, avoiding work, and you're also likely to find yourself more irritable. And again, although it may seem like laziness, it's not. It's decision fatigue. Decision fatigue will also explains why end of day choices feel impossible. You might make great decisions all morning, but by late afternoon, even choosing dinner feels overwhelming. And that's not you being dramatic. It is a genuine depletion of mental resources. Once your brain hits that empty line on the battery, it defaults to whatever requires the least effort. That's why the couch, your phone, or comfort food suddenly feel irresistible. But overload doesn't just affect your productivity or focus, it also takes a major emotional toll. It silently creates chronic guilt, the feeling of never being good enough, shame, burnout, anxiety, depression, loss of identity, and negative self talk. We punish ourselves for not being able to carry what no human should be carrying in the first place. And the hardest part is that these emotional effects often go unnoticed because they blend into everyday life. You start doubting your abilities. You compare yourself to others. You feel like you're constantly behind. You might even feel detached from things you used to enjoy because you're running on fumes. Overload quietly erodes your sense of identity until you start believing the problem is you and not the weight you're carrying. And this is exactly why so many of us fall into those harsh, self critical thoughts. Have you ever found yourself saying, I should be able to do this? Or other people can do this? Or why am I failing? The truth is, you're not failing. The system you're living in is failing. We live in a culture that glorifies being busy and constantly pushes the idea that productivity equals worth. But humans were never designed to operate at this pace. Most of us are juggling work, relationships, family, health, other obligations, communication, decisions, and constant digital noise. And we're juggling it with very little support. So, if you feel overwhelmed, it's not because you're weak, it's because you're human. The good news is that overload is not permanent. With the right strategies, you can rebuild your energy, your clarity, and your sense of control. You can recover from overload. And we can do it in a way that's practical and leaves you feeling empowered. So, first, you need to reduce input, not just add more effort. So, stop asking, how do I do more? And start asking, what can I eliminate or delegate? This includes things like declining non essential commitments, which I actually just talked about in the last podcast, The Art of Saying No. It's very important. Please give it a listen. Another thing that helps with overload is writing everything down. I have also discussed this in previous podcasts. And if you know me, then you know I am always telling people the secret to my success is a to do list. When you write things down, it helps you to feel more organized and in control of your responsibilities. A list feels lighter than a lot of thoughts constantly swirling in your head. If you don't currently make yourself lists, then I highly recommend you check out our podcast episode, To Do List Tips for Better Time Management. It's a game changer, or should I say, a life changer. Another way to recover from overload is delegating. And just like lists, if you've listened before, you know I'm always telling people how important it is to delegate. This is huge, especially when dealing with stress from being overloaded. You don't need to carry all the weight all the time. You don't need to run every errand. You don't need to make every decision. You don't need to handle every detail. You don't need to handle every responsibility. It is okay to ask for help. And it's not a weakness, it's a strategy. And if you don't have people in your life that can help you, give us a call at Your Choice Concierge. It's literally what we do. We make life easier for you by taking some of those tedious tasks and responsibilities off your plate. Another step to overcoming overload is making time to create white space in your brain. And I know making time for something else seems contradictory when we're talking about getting rid of overload, but this is important. Your brain needs boredom, silence, and stillness. This is when clarity returns. It's as easy as scheduling 15 minutes of nothing a day, or every other day, or even try once a week, whatever you can make work. That means no interaction with others, no interruptions, and no phones. White space isn't wasted time, it's recovery time. Just like your phone needs to recharge, your brain does too. When you give yourself space to pause, ideas will start flowing again. Solutions appear, your focus sharpens, even your mood improves. It's one of the most powerful and underrated tools for reducing overload, and it's absolutely worth protecting. So, with all of that in mind, let's wrap up with the most important reminder from today's episode. If there's one thing I hope you take away, it's this: you are not lazy, you are not broken, you're not unmotivated, you are overloaded. And overload is a very fixable problem with boundaries, system, support, and most importantly, kindness towards yourself. Productivity does not come from working harder. It comes from removing what weighs you down. So today, don't ask, how can I do more? Ask, what can I let go of? And that small shift could change everything. That's all for this week's episode of Productivity Boosters and Stress Reducers. Be sure to check back soon for our next episode. I'll be discussing morning routines that actually set the tone for a productive day. If you want to learn more about the effects of being overloaded and overwhelmed, have feedback about this episode, or a specific topic you'd like to hear about in the future, please email me at info@yourchoice-concierge.com. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks again for listening. I'm Stephanie Heeb, and I hope you'll join me next time for more tips and tricks to live a productive and efficient life, professionally and personally. Have you considered starting your own podcast but haven't had the time? Check out Buzzsprout. They make launching and managing your podcast effortless. Trust me, if I can do it, anyone can. Clicking the Buzzsprout link in the description will let them know we sent you and get you a $20 Amazon gift card if you decide to sign up for a paid plan. Thanks again to our sponsor, Your Choice Concierge. Until next time, productive people.